Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for this technical problem that took us some time to fix. So we're delighted to have amongst us Professor Hamid Ouali from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, who will be presenting within the LangLit, we call them LangLit talks, Langues et Littératures talks. This is LangLit talk number 2. The title is Explaining Linguistic Change, a Perspective from Amazigh and Arabic. Professor Hamid Ouali is a professor of linguistics in the Department of Linguistics at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and he has been there since 2006, exactly. Hamid holds a PhD in linguistics from the University of Michigan and an MA before in linguistics from the University of Tromsø, Norway. His research interests are guided and informed by the tenets of generative grammar, especially the minimalist program. And Hamid Ouali's research uses data from Arabic and Berber, and I think other languages as well. So he focuses more on syntactic theory, Arabic syntax, Berber syntax, and the topics that interest him the most are agreement, anti-agreement, tense, aspect, and negation. In terms of teaching, he has been taking care of syntax, general linguistics, Arabic language, and linguistics. Hamid has a number of publications. I'm just citing a few selected ones. The complementizer, verb morphology, tense and aspect in Amazigh, this is one. The complementizer layer in Arabic revisited. Uncomplex adjectival phrases in standard Arabic, restructuring and control in Arabic, the syntax of tense in Arabic, the syntax of light verbs in Jordanian Arabic and Moroccan Arabic, multiple agreement in Moroccan Arabic, and so on. Hamid has an authored book which was published by Bloomsbury in 2011, titled Agreement, Pronominal Clitics, and Negation in Amazigh Berber. He has also served as editor, co-editor of a number of works, Perspectives in Arabic Linguistics twice, and Formulaic Language. This is a 2-volume book, one on structure, distribution, and historical change, and another one on acquisition loss, psychological reality, and functional explanations. So as I said earlier, today's presentation is entitled Explaining Linguistic Change, a Perspective from Arabic, from Amazigh and Arabic. Just as a reminder for those of you who have just joined us today, the context is one in which, as I said, we have these Langues et Littératures talks. This is the second talk after the one we had in February, last February, by John Alderete, if those of you who were here remember. Now, I'd like to welcome our colleagues who made it today here. I'm not going to say the names of everyone, but I think that we have colleagues from our department, from our lab, Noordin Amrou, Hashmi Aqawi, Ibrahim Heba, Ibrahim bin Mouh back there, Fatima Al-Hamdi here. Okay, Iqbaz is there, and Tariq is also there. We have colleagues from other institutions, Hamid Sharfi from Ulum Tarbiya, Faculty of Sciences of Education, as well as Zubi Daziani. We have Abdelwahid Shkirban from Casablanca, I don't remember which institution. Ain Shakh, okay, and I think we have Zaid somewhere here from Jdida, Azif Jdida, and Si Mohammed Smirpo, I don't remember where you were recruited. Ibn Tufail, okay, and Si Hussein Amazigh from IRCAM, Centre d'Aménagement Linguistique. I would like to thank all the students, also doctoral students, and those who are still working on their dissertations and those who have finished. I wish you all the best, and thank you for coming. Now, the entire project is one which is entitled FinCom, so Professor Hamid Ouali is here, sponsored by the CNRST, Centre National pour la Recherche Scientifique et Technique, and he's been here with us for almost 1 month and a half. And I think that our students, our colleagues have benefited a lot from his presentations, which were just as interested as varied. Okay, I would like to thank you for having chosen us as an institution to host you. I would also like to thank our Dean, Dr. Leila Munir, for being supportive anytime we needed to organize a similar event. I would also like to acknowledge administrative and logistics support from the Dean's Assistant, Dunya, and Mr. Bubkar from the Accounting Service, Mr. Muhsin Amrani there, who is always ready to help us with anything technical, and Yassin Al-Bakhat is somewhere here. Thank you so much. And without further ado, I'll give the floor to see Hamid Ouali, and then I'll go there and come back here once you're done for the Q&A session. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for this undeserved introduction, Bensoukas. Before I get started, let me first extend my deep appreciation and thanks to a number of colleagues. Number one, of course, is the person who made my visit possible, a person that I look up to, who I consider one of the most important phonologists in Morocco, and a great scholar, Bensoukas. And then, of course, I'd like to thank the number of colleagues who have attended all the lectures, have coordinated my presentations, despite the fact that they're non-specialists, but took the time to come and listen to me babble away until for a couple of hours. And I would also like to seize the opportunity to thank the students. I've had a great time, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, with students, especially the MA students, for the 4 weeks that we spent talking about derivation by phase, talking about syntax. And I would have loved to spend more time with PhD students, but I got to meet some of them. And I hope this is not the end of this relationship. I hope this is just a beginning to maybe a long-term collaboration. Now, those of you who've attended my talks and presentations might see a number of things that are familiar, that I've talked about throughout the last month and a half. So what I'm presenting today is a sort of a showcase of my research agenda. The things that interest me, things that, if I might say, keep me awake at night. I'm interested in syntax and syntactic theory. But today, I'm intruding on an area that has been, source of a number of questions for me, and that's language change. Why is that? You'll see the reasons for that in a moment. Some of the facts I presented here before, some of the facts I presented in Casablanca last year with the conference that Dr. Lourise, who's here with us, thank you for coming, organized last year. And then some of the facts I shared in some presentations before this month. And some of it is, some of them are ongoing projects that I'm working on. So maybe by the end of this, we'll end up with more questions than answers. So here, some of the facts that I present, I will suggest sort of solutions to, potential answers. Others will remain open questions for future research. Now, language, as we all know, is dynamic. It's always changing. Nobody can stop change. It changes across space, time, social groups. And in the context of Morocco, Moroccan Arabic and Amazigh, Moroccan Arabic and Amazigh, just like any other natural languages, also have undergone change over time. Now the question is, how can one document change and trace these changes? Of course, if we compare these two languages, say with Romance languages or English, these languages that have long history of written record, we're talking about languages that don't, right? Both languages don't have long grammar traditions for obvious reasons. The reasons that are religious, ideological, cultural. One could understand the Moroccan Arabic, but Amazigh is sometimes, I would say, is a hard pill to swallow for us Amazigh, right? There's no reason why we shouldn't have a grammar tradition, but this is something that was imposed on us, right? It was imposed on us that there's only one language that holds that status of the language worthy of studying. Right? We had to wait for the colonial period for the French to start looking at our languages. Both of these languages don't have, as I said, written record compared to Standard Arabic, for example. However, one can still describe the various changes that Moroccan Arabic, say, or Amazigh have undergone over time through comparative methods. One can look at, lexical change, phonological change, morphological change, syntactic, semantic. If one zooms out and looks at the related varieties, dialects, languages, and so forth, and so on and so forth. However, whatever we come up with, of course, we can't put any timeline on these changes, as opposed to when you're looking at record. You can say, okay, well, this is from 12th century, and you can speculate. But we can't do that, of course, when we do comparative methods on spoken languages, and any such claims will just remain speculative. Now, the goals from my talk today is to address some examples of diachronic change in both languages, and focus on the grammaticalization aspect, or what some people call linguistic cycles, and then attempt to explain these changes by appealing to pragmatics as the initiator of change. I'm not going to spend too much on the pragmatic side, but this is the initial steps of this change. And then economy, especially syntactic, economy of derivation, as a way to explain why we have these type of cycles. So the roadmap is as follows. First, I'm going to spend some time talk about what we mean by linguistic cycles, so grammaticalization. Then zoom in and look at examples. The examples are the future tense, the progressive aspect in Arabic, something that I talked about, I think, last week in the talk here. This is for Arabic. For Amazigh, we'll look at tense, aspect, negation, and then spend some time on the dative, pronominal, clitics, which is an ongoing project. Try to explain the change, again, appealing to pragmatics and economy, and then summarize and conclude. All right. Linguistic cycles or grammaticalization. What do we mean by that? This is probably familiar to most of you, to all of you. Natural languages tend to always recruit lexical items to have a grammatical function. Always, right? And this seems to happen in a circular or in a circular manner, cyclic manner. So you have a phrase that has its own lexical meaning that gets desemanticized and eventually ends up having a grammatical function, right? Happens all over the map, right? This is not language specific phenomena, right? If one looks at the grammaticalization literature, it's all over the map. And as I said, it's cyclical in its nature, because you have a phrase that gets recruited, then it becomes reduced, and then assumes a grammatical function, gets reduced even further to a clitic, then an affix, and then disappears. And the process starts all over again. That famous example that you all know is the Jespersen cycle. In fact, it was due to him that people observed this phenomena. He, of course, observed this by looking at the negation. So he writes, the history of negative expressions in various languages makes witness the following curious fluctuation. The original negative adverb is first weakened, then found insufficient, and therefore strengthened, generally through some additional word, and in its turn may be felt as a negative proper, and may then, in the course of time, be subject to the same development as the original word. You know, English is a good case. English, if one looks at Old English, the negative marker or this intentional negation was no. This is Old English. I'm not even going to attempt reading this. Then a late Old English, something was introduced as a reinforcer of negation. Typical, you know, the negative concord. So you have no and this na verbial, right? So you're looking at this. This is late Old English. Then early Middle English. This na, which didn't carry negative force, all of a sudden became the negative marker, right? And then the first one started getting weakened, right? And then with time, what happened? That first one disappeared, and then the one that got grammaticalized became the negation marker, which we find in modern English now as not, right? And now you can see that the not itself is being reduced. Are you not in today? Aren't you in today's, right? This is a phonological reduced form. And cycle continues. French went through the same thing. Negative marker in French was ne. Je ne mange, right? This is Old French. In fact, some Canadian dialects of French until recently had this, right? And then, of course, you have the negative polarity item or negative concord pa that got reduced, and you all know what pa means. And then with time, of course, pa became the negative marker in sentential, the semantic negative marker. And now, of course, in Parisian French, you hear people say, je mange pas. No, it's gone, right? So grammaticalization, if one looks at how Van Gelderen defines it, is a process where bilexical items lose phonological weight and semantic specificity and gain grammatical functions. Hainan Kuteva, in the grammatical literature, defined it as the development from lexical to grammatical forms and from grammatical to even more grammatical forms. They devise the following parameters for grammaticalization. This is Hainan Kuteva. The first one is what they call extension, which is the rise of a new grammatical meaning when linguistic expressions are extended to new contexts. B, desemantization, or semantic bleaching, which is a loss in meaning content. And C, decategorialization, when the word loses its inherent category, loss of more syntactic properties characteristic of lexical or other less grammaticalized forms. And then erosion, which is the phonetic reduction of the words, loss of phonetic substance. Okay, with that long introduction, let's jump in and look at actual examples from our languages, starting with Arabic and zooming in on the future tense and the progressive aspect. Well, if one looks at Levantine, we go to Moroccan Arabic, we all know how future is marked, right? Is expressed with this rah. Rah, which is the same word one used for go. Typical word that gets recruited for future marker. So rah and rah, both of them are, you have the inflected form. So in Levantine, you can say raihin and then the verb, or just rah and inflected in the verb, or you have the reduced forms. All these are used. Moroccan Arabic, ghadi. Ghadi, we can use, we use the inflected form, ghadini yimshiu, right? Ghadini yaklu. Plural. But you can also say ghadi yaklu, right? The subject is plural, but the ghadi now is the. But we also have the clitic form. All of these coexist, right? So it's an ongoing change. All three forms exist. God knows when we know what the direction is, right? So it's up to the learner now, right? It's up to the initiator of change, which is of course the language acquirer, the learner. Okay? Change, the wheel of change is very, very slow, but we know where this is heading. Eventually, what we'll end up with is gha as the only marker, tense marker, future marker. So if one looks at the map, right, it's the same word that gets recruited, the motion verb go, but depending on the region, we use the active participle of go, غادي, but in the East, you use راح, right, رايح. In the Gulf, you find other forms. In Gulf, they have in some Saudi dialects, they use the ba, baruh, means I will go. And now, moving on to the progressive aspect, those of you who came to my talk last time, I spent, you know, a couple hours talking about how the grammatical aspect is expressed in the language. And so I compared standard Arabic where, for example, in a sentence like يدرس علي في المكتبة, it allows two possible readings, the habitual and the progressive, if you remember, right? But the dialect, okay, let's skip this. So yeah, you can say علي يدرس في المكتبة عادة الآن, now, or يدرس في المكتبة عادة, right? It's ambiguous. But the dialects are starting to disambiguate these two, right? Moroccan Arabic is at the very, very, very early stage. Because we can say جالس كيقرأ, right? Which means now, right? But جالس is not, you know, you can say كيقرأ or جالس كيقرأ. It's slowly, it's getting there. So it's very, very, very beginning, or some dialects use خدام, right? خدام تقرأ. Of course, there were other forms that I will share with you, which I discovered last time we talked about this. I have a table where I have these new forms. Now, Egyptian Arabic is the same thing. It's at the very early stage of the change. So Egyptian Arabic is exactly like Moroccan Arabic. They have biyudrus, but they also use qa'id or amal biyudrus, right, to disambiguate. But it's not obligatory, right? It's not. So these two are the same. However, if one zooms out and look at how the other Arabic varieties do this, you find dialects who are advanced in the grammaticalization process. So in the Gulf, it is obligatory to use guide when you're talking about progressive. It's not optional. It's not optional. So you have yudros, which is the habitual, but if you want to express an event, an ongoing event, guide is obligatory, right? So it tells you it's there, it's already. So in Najd, this is Najdi Arabic. In Najd, they say قاعد يدرس, okay? And they have both forms. They have قاعدين inflected or قاعد. This is the Saudi Arabic. If you go further east in Iraq, you find varieties which are further down the change. This is the example of this is Najafi dialect in Iraq, southern Iraq. In Najafi, they have, just like we have غاديين, this is for the future, غاديين, غادي, وغا, they have similar forms in the progressive. So they have قاعدين, or they have قاع, and they have قا. Used exchangeably and the same, right? Again, you know where the direction, you know what's going to happen down the road. But it's interesting that they have all these three forms. Okay? They say قاعدين, يقرون, or يقرون, or قاع يقرون, or قا يقرون. Right? All three forms are there. But so this is for, of course, the progressive, and it's obligatory. It's not even optional in these varieties. The habitual is expressed by dropping, but not using this. Right? I'll give you a little. I don't know if you can read this. So I assembled a number of facts from different varieties. Egyptian is similar to Arabic, has the قاعد and amal. So note the two verbs that are recruited is you have قاعد for posture verb sit, but you also have the verb work, right? amal, which we also use خدام. So you can see that whatever verb means قاعد is used. So in Emirati you use جالس. In some Baghdadi dialects are actually also further down in the change. So here Jewish Christian Baghdadi use qad or qat or qa. Muslim Baghdadi uses da. Bahzani have ku, ki, and ka. Najafi, as I showed you earlier, have all these forms, ga'id, ga'id, and ga or ga. Lebanese, Levant. In the Levant, they have the three forms, ammal, inflected, ammal, inflected, and they have am. All these three, in am badrus and things like that. Moroccan Arabic, so galis, khaddam, barak, these are the ones that I found in the literature. The ones I discovered when I talked about this last week, this is thanks to Si Bensoukas Khayed, Si Budlal Tayh, right? Say in some varieties they say Tayh yakul. I don't know if you, yeah? Some people nodding, saying yes? Khayed, yeah, but Tayh, yeah, exists in some varieties. Si Budlal is not here, but he, and Sayr is also, Sayr, yeah. So it's interesting we have all these forms. Obviously, who knows, which one will end up with as the progressive marker. Maltese Arabic has Aida and Ed. Najdi, as I mentioned earlier, has the Ga'id. Ghamdi, which is another Saudi dialect, has. So you get the picture, right? We're all over. Some varieties are at the beginning, some are, halfway through. Others are really towards the end of the grammaticalization change. Map showing all this. So we end up with three types of varieties. Type 1, the Egyptian and Moroccan Arabic type, which are represent the initial step, the initial stage of the change, right? We have galas and ga'id and the equivalent of these active participles, but they're optional. The second one is Najdi Arabic, which where this is no longer optional. It's obligatory, but we still have the full form. We don't have the reduced form yet. And then number 3 is the Najafi Arabic dialect. So you can see all the forms, including the clitic, the phonological reduced form, ga. Okay. Yep, so you have the guide, and then middle stage you have the uninflected form. Yeah, I can easily say راه الدراري خدام كيلعبوا. Yeah, الدراري الأولاد, but خدام is singular, right? It's not inflected, right? You might. Native speakers, we all native speakers of Moroccan Arabic. And then, of course, the reduced forms, as you see in the Levant, Am or Najafi. Okay, moving on to Amazigh. So these are I gave you examples, 2 examples, the tense one with the future, and then the progressive aspect in Moroccan Arabic. So you see the grammaticalization is at work. Same direction. And by the way, this is not surprising when you go and look outside the Moroccan Arabic. If you look at the grammaticalization literature, this is exactly what happens. You got these motion verbs. Je vais, I'm gonna. Yeah, these are the same things that are recruited for tense. Aspect, the same thing. Posture verbs are always the ones that get recruited, get grammaticalized. So nothing surprising, which is always an important point. We have to keep reminding ourselves. Moroccan Arabic and Amazigh are not spoken in a vacuum. They're natural languages, right? And sometimes appealing to things that treat language as a natural language, as a product of the human mind, these are reminders. Yeah, the explanation sometimes can come from theoretical fields that, frameworks that, of course, take these things into consideration. Now, as tense aspect, negation, Amazigh. Well, future tense. Future tense in some Amazigh languages is expressed by using the particle da or dath. Right? In Amazigh, they say dath, they do, or da. In some, you have ara. Right? Okay. Well, it looks like if one looks at the form of da, it looks like it came from the verb yidda, which is go. So you can say ادعى لي غير مزيرث. Ali went to the homeland, Mazirth. So it's of course still used to mean go, but you can use it in a context where you have an realist, an embedded, an inflected clause. So you say ادعى لي أذكرز. He went to plow, right? You have da and then krat. So you get some stuff, right? And then one can imagine that maybe that's what happens. The next step is to treat this da as a grammatical form to express future. Now, this is not just me saying this. This is Yazzie, yes. So he expresses this. He says that, and I'll attempt reading this. So, quant au futur, plus ou moins proche dans le temps, il peut être exprimé par la ouist ou l'accompli grâce à la morphologie du verbe avec comme adjuvant une particule adverbiale comme ad, rad. So says forme grammaticalisée de rire, ad or je veux. He says these are come from either want or adour, je vais partir. So he has got different sources of these, right? Want, go. The go forms are clear, but the want form, I don't know, right? Because he doesn't really spend too much time on this. He just makes these statements and then moves on. But it's there, right? This is not me saying, and it's not, again, it's not surprising that we have verb go that gets grammaticalized to future, right? This is not bizarre. For the progressive in Amazigh, some varieties, some languages use the la marker, right? So for me, in my Amazigh, that's spoken in, if I have this la marker, like to do, la plus the imperfective verb means he's related, he's eating, right? It's ambiguous between, of course, habitual and the progressive, but the question is, what is this la? A la looks like it's a grammaticalized form of yilla, which is be. This is what Bukhres claims in her 1998 dissertation published later in our book. So this yilla is what we use to express, for example, existential cases. Yilla ali mazir, ali is illa ali laytit, saf yilla and the verb in the imperfective form. So it's not surprising to say that this la is what got grammaticalized. Yilla is what got grammaticalized to mean the progressive. One of the phenomena that has been discussed in detail in literature is the Jespersen cycle we see in with negation. Right? This is a clear case. So negation is expressed. Well, I wouldn't say differently. So we have the main negator, which is ur, which I think all varieties have, where there's a variation is in this negative concord item, sha. Okay? So this is an example for Amazigh or sinr sha al-yaza. I don't know this man. Now, sha, if one wonders, right, it is a negative concord item. It is there to reinforce negation. It's not the negative marker itself, because if you drop it, the sentence end up being grammatical. And it's in complementary distribution with NPIs. For example, we say or sinkhwalu, right? Or alikh agij. You can't have sha. Now, if you have sha, it ends up ungrammatical. So that means it's there as a negative concord item. It's not semantically the negator. And so it's, if one looks at the grammatical, the grammaticalization path, it looks like, you know, it got grammaticalized, but it hasn't assumed the semantic negation yet. Where did it come from? Well, we have a word that has the same phonological form, meaning thin, right? So You can say, you know, somebody see a cat sick, say, Hamusha chesha, right? He ate something, right? And sha means thin, and it's not surprising that that's a word that could get recruited, grammaticalized as a negative concord item. تقبيليت has a different word. They have ara. تعريفيت has also sha. Okay, the only difference, I think, if one compares Amazigh to these, Amazigh allows the only word order, the sha'ur, right? Sha'ur, which others don't. Now, I'm not talking about the morphological form of negative, the so-called negative perfective. Now, Bensoukas has an important paper on this. If one wants to look at the negative form of the perfective. Now, it's negative. The only difference, of course, is that it's not the one that expresses semantic negation. It's these two, the ur and sha. Now, if we zoom out and look at all these varieties, it looks like we have three types. The first type would be possibly tashlhit and Ouali, which I think tashlhit only has ur. Yeah, you don't have, right? So there's no equivalent of sha in tashlhit. We're still waiting. Type 2, the ones that have bipartite negation, this is tarifi, taqbaylit, and similar ones. We have neg and the verb and then some negative concord item. The third type is Amazigh, which allows these two orders, ur and then verb and then sha and then or sha'ur, right? Which gradually now it's undergoing change because, correct me if I'm wrong, because a lot of times people just say shaur, right? Shaur. And who knows if that will get reanalyzed as the negated itself, right? Not shaur as your negation, right? Not as a complex word anymore, right? Okay, now to one of my favorite topics, and that's the dative pronominal clitics. All of these phenomena that I've talked about before, I have papers on, and I have attempted to answer some of these. The dative pronominal clitics, this is an ongoing project. Yeah, I have work on the distribution of the clitics, right? But I haven't looked at it from the diachrony lengths. And diachrony length is important to explain some very interesting behavior of these clitics in Amazigh. All right, I'll explain what I mean by that. Okay. Oh. Now, Amazigh is one of those languages where you can express the indirect object by using, or the indirect object by using pronominal clitics, right? So I would say, nu, right? Okay, but you can see that the position of these pronominal clitics, unlike, say, Moroccan Arabic, أعطيتها الكتاب, أعطيته لها, right? But if you say غن أعطيها الكتاب, you say غن أعطيه لها, the clitics are still with the verb, right? Amazigh behaves differently. If you have some grammatical particle in the sentence, like a future marker or the progressive marker or even negation or complementizer, these end up attracting the clitics. Okay, so the clitics doesn't stay in C2 or. So the distribution of the pronominal clitics, what's interesting about them is that they cut across syntax, morphology, and phonology. Now, there are consistent patterns when we look at the distribution of pronominal clitics in Amazigh. Right? These consistent patterns are as follows. Okay, so the consistent patterns are this. So you have, if you have a verb and just the clitics, then the verbs go with the clitics go with the verb. If you have something higher than the verb, they go with this higher grammatical item. Well, that's the regular behavior, right? But if you look across Amazigh dialects, Amazigh languages, I should say, you start seeing some really weird behavior. Okay, Siwa is, or Siwa, Amazigh is one of these, where in Siwa, it doesn't matter what a grammatical element you have, say particle or auxiliary, or the pronominal clitics always stay with the verb. Okay, so you can say things like ga, will, give, and then you. It doesn't matter. So the other languages don't do this. This is just Siwa in Egypt. So the other thing is number 5. A number of languages actually double the dative, which is the unmarked order, in fact. It's the typical way of expressing, say, I will give something to Hinu, I'll give it to her. You have to double it. It's not how you have, but it's really the unmarked one, the most frequent one. So you say, she has Hinu, she has, and then Ihnu, you double it. Right? Doubling is becoming more frequent. That's number 1. And then, this is from Ktama, I don't know, Ktama Tarifit. So in Ktama Tarifit, you can split the distribution of this. You can say, Shas, so the future marker, and then the dative, and then the verb, and then you have the accusative, which is very interesting behavior. Right? You split these clitics. Right? This is what. These are called divergent patterns, right? So these divergent patterns, okay, well, some resist syntactic explanation, right? The clitic distribution is clear. It's easy to, I shouldn't say easy, but you have a consistent syntactic theory to explain it. But these divergent ones are interesting, and they raise a lot of questions. Why, right? How do we explain the number 6, for example, Ktama Tarifit? How do we explain doubling? Right? And what's going on with Siwa? What's going on there? Why is it? Why doesn't it behave like Amazigh, where the pronominal clitics are attracted to higher hosts? Okay. Before I zoom in, this is just to give you a picture of how the pronominal system looks in Amazigh. This is from Tamazight, give or take some. Probably have different forms. So the subject pronominal forms are things like nuk and keen, he, etc. So those are strong forms. And the pronominal forms, you have 2. You have the what are called direct object, pronominal clitics or accusative clitics. This is him, th, t. And then the object, the dative ones. All right, so I'll start with Tamazight spoken in Khmisat region. So that's a variety of the Atlas. Example you've seen before. So I gave water to Hinu, you can say Ushikhas, or das Ushikh, future. Now you see the clitics are with the future marker. If you have negation, you say Uras Ushikh, right? They go with the negative marker. If you have the aspectual marker, the la, yeah, las tikikh di ma. And then sometimes they go with higher element, even like complementizer. If you have something like Fatima, it was Fatima that I gave it to her. You say Fatima aiz tushan, so this comp plus the 2 clitics. Or the aerialis marker, for example, rikh adh, and then this aerialis marker, adas tushakh. Now, if all of these co-occur, right, if you have the complementizer, negation, future marker, what happens? In my variety, they go with the lowest, with the future marker. Now, there is some variation. Think some of them put this clitic sandwiched between neg and the future marker. So some varieties put the comp, the negation, and then the clitics, and then the future. I think Tarifit does that. Okay. All right. Well, if one looks at other contexts, like in Taqbaylit, Taqbaylit behaves like Amazigh. But then you have this Tarifit, the Sanhaja Tarifit varieties. I don't know. I mean, Eugenia Gutava discusses all sorts of interesting facts, right? I don't know if, right, I'll trust her descriptions is here, but I mean, it'll be interesting to double check a lot of this and explain some of these facts. Now, in some of the varieties that she describes, this is within a very small pocket in the north, in Rif. So say, she says in Tarzout, you have examples like 10, right? Where you have negation, and then you have the clitics, plus, of course, the directional morpheme, the id. Okay? And it looks like this behavior is consistent with what we see in other varieties. Okay. The regular behavior can be summarized as follows. If you have a verb, the pronouns, pronominal clitics will go with the verb. If you have some sort of functional grammatical items like negation or auxiliary, these end up attracting the clitics and they don't go with the verb. I'm borrowing Jamal Halla's notation here, V plus clitic, but if you have F, which stands for some functional error, clitics go with them. And of course, if you have more than one, where F stands for either comp, neg, or TAM, tense aspect or mood. All right. Okay, well, that's the regular behavior. How do we explain these other deviant behavior? For example, Gersel, rahimahullah, who passed away a couple of weeks ago, who's left a rich literature for us, and we're very appreciative for all the work he's done. Gersel, rahimahullah, says that in a solution, you can actually optionally have the clitic in a post-verbal position, right? So you can say, letissa, he's drinking it, or drinks it, or laysat. Now, yeah, some people might not accept that, which is fine and normal, because one would expect variation, but it just shows you, this is interesting behavior. All of a sudden now you can see that you can optionally leave it attached to the verb as opposed to go with the particle. All right, so that goes against the general pattern. Now we said F, clitic, and V. That's not what we have here. The Ktama Tarifit has this weird phenomenon where the two are split. I don't know if your dialect does it tariq or not, but yeah, so you're splitting the data from the accusative. And then, of course, we have the siwa in Egypt, where none of this is happening. Everything goes with the main verb, right? Fixed position. This was first reported by Emile Laouste, in his little book on siwa. And then, of course, we have clitic doubling that I mentioned earlier. Clitic doubling is all over the map, right? A lot of varieties double. So, if I summarize the picture for you, you have the clitic front-end typical behavior. That's found in Amazigh, Tabari, Tarifit, Tashlihit, and Tuareg, all of these. But then, you have this optional clitic front-end. So far, we found it with Aytghrushan, okay? The partial clitic front-end, if Jena Kuteva is right, then that's what we find in Ktama Tarifit and the neighboring varieties. No clitic front-end at all, that's Siwa, right? That's the east in Egypt. They don't do front-end at all. Clitic doubling, it's tested all over the place, right? all of them double. And the question is, how can we explain all these patterns, right? How can we explain these different behavior when it comes to clitic placement? It takes me to, if you allow me, talk about Emile Laouist's work. Now, acknowledging, of course, the colonial motivations and motives of the French grammarians, okay? Still, of course, we know that there's some scientific value to what they did, okay? And his book on Siwa is so rich that there's one quote, one of my favorite quote, which shows how they were ahead of their time. And so allow me to read this, how he describes the distribution of pronominal clitics in Siwa. He says, contrairement à ce qu'on observe dans tous les dialectes connus, les pronoms rigimes occupent en Siwi une place fixe à la suite des verbes, que celui-ci soit ou non, ou cela dépend de la négation, de la particule du futur, de certains termes interrogatifs ou relatifs, la loi d'attraction, qui est d'application constante en berbère, ne joue plus ou ne joue plus dans le dialecte, ne joue pas, ne joue pas ou ne joue plus dans le dialecte qui nous intéresse ici. Now what's really interesting about this, he says this, and then he continues describing the language, right? But what's really interesting about this is the following. First of all, it shows you that there's a man that knows a lot about the other languages. And he knows that this is not the typical behavior, right? What I've told you right so far about this is not new, right? They've discovered all this behavior. That's all, yeah, Amazigh does this. You have the clitics go with all these different particules, etc., etc. But he says, this language that I'm looking at doesn't do that anymore. It doesn't have the clitics go with the complementizer or with negation or with tense or aspect. And then it says the law of attraction that applies constantly in Berber, la loi d'attraction. But this is all these people are doing descriptive work, but they talk about the law of attraction. What the heck is the law of attraction, right? And then he says, does not apply or no longer applies. This is a diachronic flavor here, right? It's diachronic flavor. So, of course, then he goes on to just describe Siwa in detail. And it made me wonder, so what the heck does he mean by the la loi d'attraction? How much time do I have, Simtugas? So what did he get with the attraction? Okay, so I looked into the historical context. Oh, of course, we know Wakanaga's law, right? Wakanaga's law says that the unstressed words are placed in syntactic second position after the first stressed word in a clause. This is known. So obviously, this guy is informed by his, the historical context, the literature at the time. This is 1892, Wakanaga's law. The Tabla Mosafia that we all know. Tabla Mosafia's law says, it forbids clitics to appear in initial positions. It's a descriptive statement. It's about Slavic languages. But one can guess that he's informed by this type of literature. And it just looks like, clitics is, Amazigh languages are no different. They have these laws at work. But he calls them la loi d'attraction. Well, fast forward, theoretical formworks gave us the tools to explain this, right? Example, generative literature, for example. We can explain now what we mean by attraction, right? If one takes structure seriously, sentences, of course, have structural hierarchy. Nobody can deny that. That was acknowledged before even the 50s, before generative linguistics, with structuralists. Amazigh shouldn't be an exception. Sentences are hierarchically organized. So how do we reconcile the fact that you have these pronouns that are semantically related to verbs, yet their surface position is way far from the verb, right? And so if you look at the genitive literature, we have all sorts of accounts. Thanks to Jamal Halla's seminal work in 1989, his dissertation, he gave us a long story for how the clitic placement is derived in Amazigh. Okay. Of course, theoretical tools that were available in 89 are not the same, the ones that were developed later with the evolution of the theory. So his story in 89, for example, is different from his story in 2005. Bukhris has also worked on this. I've worked on the distribution of this. Balqadi has an interesting work which builds on all of this, all of the prior work, Balqadi's dissertation, and more recently Al-Hankari. All of these, of course, are analyses that try to explain the regular behavior that I talked about. F, clitic, V, right? Or if you have just a verb, you have the clitic. That's the regular behavior. None of these can explain these other deviant behaviors. Okay? None of these can handle the optional clitic fronting, the partial clitic fronting, the no clitic fronting, and the clitic doubling. Okay? None of these syntactic stories. So, out of all these, I will focus on the clitic doubling aspect, and I'll attempt to give you a story, right? Explain why that is. The other ones are up for grabs. We still don't have a story for them yet. Start with the clitic doubling. It looks, so as I said earlier, it is attested in a wide range of Amazigh languages, but it looks like it's another case of grammaticalization, another case of language change, where you have a pronoun gradually changing into an agreement morpheme. Right? That the dative affix, the dative, looks like the dative pronominal, it behaves more like an agreement rather than a pronoun. And I'll give you reasons for why I think that is. So first, I'll share with you, this is from Bensoukas' work in 2012, who in fact claimed that the Amazigh languages, especially actually in Siwa, that the dative has changed into an agreement morpheme and not a pronoun. So this is from a typology perspective. I'll try to give you more theoretical account for it. So yeah, so if you look at his chart, he takes looks at sentences from literature mostly, plus his own field work on Siwa. And some varieties show nothing. For example, this is Il Fugaha has 0 number of doubling. Tamajek is almost 0. Now, of course, as the saying goes, evidence of absence is not absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, right? The fact that he didn't find it doesn't mean that he doesn't have it. So tashlahit, okay, 78, about 4% of doubling. Tashlahit in Gwadmiwa, yeah. It's got it, out of 93, 193, he's got about 14 cases. That's 7%. So if you go down, you will see that in some cases, like Dames and Shiwa, really high percentages, 73%, for example, of doubling in Shiwa. Amazigh, 86%. So we double, so they double all the time. Yeah, it's high, very frequent. Expected, right? Changes, we're not always on the same page. So as I said earlier, it is attested, doubling phenomena is attested in a lot of varieties. This is a dative. The accusative clitic itself is also attested in some, but it's not as common. Okay, so let's see, skip this. Here's, Balqadi reports that in Taqbaylit you can say things like ينغت وزرن. So you double the direct object. He killed the snake. ينغت وزرن. So you double the snake. This is from Mashab's work. So, first, what conditions license clitic doubling? When do we double something? When do we double the indirect object? Does it have to be animate? Does it have to be definite? Does it have to be specific? Well, Swag shows us from Siwa that you can double pretty much anything. In Siwa, you can double inanimate expressions. القاس يالقوس. القوس in Siwa is the bicycle. اكتمرث. So القاس inanimate. You can double negative foreign items, which are indefinites. Right? And NPRs are indefinites. So you say ليت الرفاس is شرا. شرا is anything. So he doubles يشرا. Or حد يحد. You can لا تساش السر secret يحد. So you have this anyone. And here's one. There's the killer. You can double interrogative expressions. You can say to whom. So يبطن يشاس. That's also doubled, which is very strange. So Swag then concludes that Siwa has developed inflectional dative agreement. And I kind of hinted to this in 2011, where I said that the dative and the accusative clitics in their fixed distribution behave like affixes. I didn't really get into details, but I was suspicious about the behavior in Siwa compared to the other languages. So this suggests that the dative pronominal clitics have grammaticalized as object agreements in Siwa, right? And I think the same thing is happening at least in Amazigh, right? You have this mixed behavior, cases where it really looks like an agreement morpheme. All right. Next is explaining the change, linguistic change. Now, what is the motivation of change? What factors initiate the change? It's usually our external factors. You know, pragmatics plays a great role. And I'll give you examples of how pragmatics plays a role. Then, why do these full forms go through semantic, should say semantic, not semantic, semantic bleaching, then changing the category, the categorialization, become inflected, and then phonologically reduced? I will appeal to economy of derivation for this. Okay, pragmatics. I think I gave you this example last time when we talked about the progressive. For me, if I say, when I say that, I'm trying to get your attention. I'm trying to alert you when I say that. That's the program. Yeah, it means they're playing the progressive, but it is another layer, pragmatically, meaning you gotta go get them or something, right? That's when I use خدام. خدامين. You might disagree, but that's, yeah. When I use dari جالسين كيلعبوا عادي, it's okay, all right, they're playing. Right? Maybe not salient for some of you. According to Yusuf Haddad, Lebanese Arabic, Haddad tells me that in Lebanese Arabic, if you say قاعد عم يحضر لي تلفزيون, if you say قاعد عم يحضر لي تلفزيون, you say that when you're really not approving of the, yes, is watching television. قاعد بيحضر لي, yeah. So قاعد there means progressive, of course, but pragmatically means I disapprove of this. So one can imagine that this is pragmatically, this is what happens. You want to convey something, and you start introducing these elements to reinforce the progressivity of an event which you disapprove of, right? But then, of course, the learner gradually reanalyzes this and uses this as the means to express whatever grammatical function you want, progressivity in this case. Right? So this is not strange. Mitchell and Hassan report in their book that Ammal does the same thing in Egyptian Arabic. They say Ammal بيلعب. Actually it should be he's playing. Sorry, no, he's going on. Oh, he's going on and playing. Sorry, and he should stop when you hear that. So pragmatically. So of course we know that semantically, a sentence, the proposition means you have an event in progress, a play. But the pragmatic layer is, I do not approve of this. Now the system of change, why do we get for these forms to become phonologically reduced in the clitic form? And this is where economy of derivation comes in. Comparing the syntactic distribution of full forms and reduced forms reveals that the full forms involve more syntactic computations, complex structures, whereas the reduced forms do not. And if you're faced with both, the learner always goes with the most economical one. So if you have the option of merging something, right, say full inflected form, and then having to displace it, but if you have another option of taking that reduced form of that and just merge it directly as your tense or aspectual, well, then it makes sense to just do the one that you merge the aspectual marker directly, or a future marker directly. Right? Well, why do I have to use غاديين? I'm exaggerating here, but a learner faced with both, you can pick one over the other. So that's how one could explain grammaticalization. So you set your parameter to the one which involves less computation. Now, let me test this with you. If one looks at a simple example from Moroccan Arabic, you hear something like this. جالس كي يشرب قهوة مع راسه. جالس كي يشرب القهوة. The sentence is ambiguous, right? Raise your hand if you disagree that this sentence is not ambiguous. Nobody, right? It could mean that he is sitting while drinking coffee. Right? جالس كي يشرب قهوة مع راسه. But it could also mean he's drinking coffee. جالس كي يشرب قهوة. Not necessarily sitting. He could be standing in one of those Japanese type of coffee shops. You sit. I think in France you have them too. You sit and you drink coffee on the go, sip and you go. So, right, they're ambiguous. When a sentence is ambiguous, typical intro syntax, that involves structural ambiguity, right? Two separate structures. The first one, you have a predicate جالس, which you predicate of the subject. And then you have this other secondary predication that says, and at the same time, it's drinking coffee. Right? Two predicates. جالس is its own predicate, right? And then the other one is secondary, حال, secondary predication. The other one, no. جالس does not, it's disseminated, does not literally mean sit. It has a grammatical function, progressive. Okay? Two separate structures. One, you have the predicate that has an adjunct, modifying it. The other one, no, you have جالس, which is the one that marks aspect. Okay? Now here's, one contest this, right? Contest this claim. If I ask you this, right. Let me add to this. If I ask you, شنو جالس كي يشرب؟ قهوة, yeah. But does my question, when I ask you, do you understand it as, I mean, وشنو literally sitting or drink? Or just the one? Just the main one. Which is exactly what you expect if one looks at the structure. Another person who we lost last 3 weeks is Haj Ras. Haj Ras, in his seminal work 1967 on island effects, this is exactly the context where you can't extract out of. If you have an adjunct, you can't extract out of an adjunct. You can't extract from كيشرب القهوة. So therefore, you can't ask about قهوة here. That's an island. Right? So you shouldn't expect that. That's exactly why the only reading you get when I say شنو كشرب is this one, because you can extract out of this. This is not an islet. So that's beautiful, right? So it shows you that now we have two. One that's galis, literally means sitting as a predicate, but where the other one is, has assumed the aspectual grammar, clear, and structurally reduced. This one involves two. You have this predicate phrase, so it's a predicate, taking an adjunct, which is also another clause. كيشرب قهوة, it's another clause, right? But this one you have a monoclausal structure, and it's okay. You can extract out of those, no problem. Let me skip through this real quick. Okay. Its syntactic distribution, you can see that the either Moroccan Arabic or even other dialects, you have the fully inflected ones, طالبات قاعدات يقرون or طالب جالسين يقرأوا. But then with time, you end up getting the reduced form, the uninflected forms. And so, why is that the case? I appeal to what typical economy principle in early forms of minimalism, which has to do with merge. And we spent 4 weeks talking about merge, for those of you in derivation by phase, a very simple syntactic operation that is involved in structure building. It's a structure building device. And you have two types. You have the external and internal merge, which are basically the same operation, right? Just take two things and you build your structure. However, if you can delay merge, in other words, if you have the option between internal merge and external merge, those of you who remember from syntax, it's always external merge is always preferred over internal merge, taking something from internal and deriving. So faced with, say, for example, A, structure A and B, when I say faced, optionality exists in language, where you see that you have two optional forms. With time, taking B, where you have, say, for example, in English, might, which grammaticalized from might, the might, right, may. Having merging that and have to displace it, move it, with time it's better just merge in T. That would be your tense marker. By analogy, if I have am and ga and qa'din, etc., the full forms is this participle form, right? That grammaticalized now as the progressive. But then, of course, you have to displace it. You have to move it to, in this case, aspect. It's an aspect marker. And, well, if you have two options, and you saw with Najaf, the Najaf dialect, they have all three. In other words, the learner is exposed to all three. Well, one involves a more complex, computationally complex operation. You have a full form that has to displace. And there's a reason, of course, I didn't share with you the facts, but you can look at my paper. There is evidence to show that you do perform movement in A. The subject position is one case. In A, you can say galsin drari kaylabu, right? You can sandwich the subject between, or drari galsin taylabu. But with the reduced forms, you can't break the adjacency between the verb and the reduced form is very strict. That shows you that. Okay. So sentences with the full forms require more syntactic operations than reduced forms. Economical derivations are preferred over non-economical derivations. And overall, this is what Chomsky refers to as computational efficiency, which is the third factor in language design. Computationally efficient operations are more preferred. So this takes me, so I spent some time on the progressive, right? Here's what makes me think that the dative is undergoing change in Amazigh languages, and I will conclude with that. So doubling. When I say I showed the street to the road to again, this is the unmarked order. you can say snakhasna abrid al-washun, I showed them. Or you can do snakhasni al-washun abrid. It's fine, either way. Dublin is not clitic left dislocation, because some people are like, oh, this you're dealing with clitic left dislocation. It's not. Because of the following reason. If I clitic left dislocate the DP, the opposite happens. You get topicalized. Say, Washun, breathe. Yeah. What happens? E becomes, you can't have il washun snakhasna breathe. You can't have the case marker, E. And therefore, yeah, this is directly merged there. It's not a result of movement. In fact, if you put E back in 14b, it becomes ungrammatical. You can't say il washin snakhasna. It's bizarre, right? It's ungrammatical. You can get it. In fact, with clefts, the opposite happens. You say il washun I snakh. I don't know. I'm sure the other variety behaves. Umi, you can't have the dative. Yeah, you can't use snakhas. No, which is very interesting, right? None of the varieties I looked at allow this, which is interesting because normally if you don't have cleft, you have to double. But when you do this, doubling becomes impossible. By the way, for the talk I gave about this, I made the analogy between this and the phenomenon of anti-agreement effect. Remember anti-agreement effect, known across Amazigh languages? You extract the subject, you lose agreement. This is exactly, you extract the DP, what happens? The clitic becomes prohibited. You can't have the clitic. The clitic double literature has a proposal. It says, well, maybe these are cases of what they call the big DP. It's the big DP hypothesis. The clitic starts with the double as a constituent. This is just to solve the theta criterion problem, right? Because you have two arguments with the one verb. It's like, okay, well, they start to, those of you who speak French, I gave him the book to Juan. I gave him, you can say, him to Juan. And they say, him and Juan start together as one DP. And then the clitic just raises out of this. Now, I argue against this. Now, historically, I don't know. It might have been the case. But there's clear evidence that this is not what we have in Amazigh. Now, in my variety, I get first conjunct agreement. And I'd love to hear what you guys get. So in Amazigh, I can say, Swah nud ali aman. Or Swan alud ali aman. This is called first conjunct agreement. Do you, yeah? Do you? All right. So you have Swa agreeing just with the first conjunct, not with, yeah, yeah, exactly. So you can either do plural or singular. وشي خاص يهنو أمان وشي خاص إعلي ذهنو أمان. شي خاص is singular, but right, just with the first conjunct. So this is a problem for the big DP hypothesis, because if this is singular, you're telling me that the clitic moved just out of the first DP. But this is a problem. This is what we call coordinate structure constraint violation. It's a strong island. You can't move just one of it. So anyway, to make a long story short, what I'm arguing is that the clitic doubling, what we have is actually the dative is an agreement marker, right? It's an agreement marker. Don't have to worry about the structure. It's something here. The argument is ihnu. The direct object is say aman, but this is just some agreement morpheme. I can get in detail in the Q&A session. This is adopting Van Golden's head preference principle, which basically says, well, if you have the choice between a phrase and a head, you go with the head, right? Full pronoun reduces to a head, an agreement marker. In accordance with the HPP, a speaker will build B rather than A if given evidence compatible with either. You know, evidence means you see both, right? And then the learner would choose one structure over the other. The FP stands for any functional category, a pronoun, as well as an adverb or preposition. This is an overarching principle. So is merged in the head position in B, but occupies the specified position in A. And I will conclude as follows. Language is in constant state of change. Studying this change does not always require direct diachronic comparison from written record, but it can be effectively analyzed through observable linguistic cycles. What got me interested in this, because it really makes me look at a wide range of languages to compare, and it makes me discover all sorts of things, right? Than say if I just stay in one little bubble. Moroccan Arabic and Amazigh, in these two languages, we see clear evidence of such cycles. All these examples I shared with you, particularly in the grammaticalization of tense, aspect, and negation. These developments can be explained by both internal and external forces, such as pragmatic pressures, as I described them, and the need for semantic disambiguation when you have, say, habitual versus progressive, and syntactic economy if one takes structure seriously. Now, stating the obvious, and one way to introduce, summarize my stay here has been very enriching experience. Coming back to one's roots, the Moroccan linguistic landscape remains remarkably fertile with many areas still unexplored and ripe for investigation. There's a lot of work to be done. There's pressing need for further research to deepen our understanding of and enrich the growing body of literature on these languages, Amazigh. I mean, I come from a very, so we share the same region. It's amazing how many just varieties we have just in a little small pocket. But I don't know of any work that has really detailed description of all the varieties from the region. And same thing goes for other varieties. But a lot of work that was done that actually we rely on, work that was done in 90s, and we have examples of scholars in this room have done tremendous work on describing these languages. But there's still a lot to be done. Moroccan Arabic and Amazigh do not exist in isolation, of course. They are dynamic components of the broader human linguistic experience. So any contribution to their study, of course, enhances our collective knowledge of how human language functions, evolves, and adapts. And I'll stop there. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hamid Ouali, for this very enriching talk. And we'll move on to the Q&A session right now. Of course, later there are some refreshments that will be served in the staff room. It's just across from here, so don't leave. Okay, we're going there together. I think that for logistical reasons, if you ask your questions from there, they won't be recorded on the video. So I'll just put a chair here, and I'll be asking you to use a mic. Okay? I'll do that right now.
And that's only fair.
Thank you very much, Professor Ouali. Thank you, Karim, for being behind the organization of this event. Professor Ouali, I enjoyed your presentation. Very informative, very copious. And the main point there is that stability in language, as they say, is a myth. You know, languages are in constant, change. Stability in language is like rigor mortis, as I read somewhere. And there are even people in sociolinguistics, researchers who point to the notion like Professor Yussi, Abdurrahim Yussi, is talking about dynamic synchrony, la synchronie dynamique. That's something I really commend you on, and I enjoyed, and I got the information that I missed. I did some readings on Amazigh syntax, Moroccan Arabic syntax, but not, I couldn't capture the details that you have talked about. Now, I have a specific question that keeps disturbing me, actually. When we talk, so you have made mention of Moroccan Arabic and Amazigh as being examples of languages, as is the case with other languages, of course, that are in constant change. And you have made it clear that, the syntactic phenomena that you have reviewed, are evidence enough that language is in progress, is changing. Now, I am afraid, correct me if I'm wrong, that the underlying assumption behind what is assumed here is that each language has taken its course, its evolutionary course, while there is this possibility that the two languages can mutually influence each other, especially there are accounts that in Moroccan Arabic there is a substratum of Amazigh. So to what extent can the influence of Amazigh on Moroccan Arabic be a factor, especially when it comes to phenomena like negation and the Jespersen cycle that you have mentioned? Thank you very much. Thank you, Karim.
So, yeah.
That these two languages, of course, exist in separate planets. No, yeah, this is a case where these two languages coexist, and it's interesting how much syntax they share. Obviously, take the example of negation that you mentioned. Yeah, I mean, you look at Moroccan Arabic; it's same phenomena going on with ma and sh. In fact, even the distribution of sh is almost similar. There are some differences, of course, but my perspective here, yeah, if I look at just each of them separately, I try to give a grammaticalization story. In fact, I'm saying what you observe in Amazigh or Moroccan Arabic is not surprising, right? This is typical of what you find in the grammaticalization literature and what happens in other languages. But give also an explanation from a theoretical point of view. But whether one language introduces a chain as a result of contact with the other, I have no answer for you in that domain. And it's a tough one to answer, right? Because again, if one looks at the time through a time lens, we just, since we don't have any written record, we don't know which one of them had didn't have let's say bipartite negation, which one doesn't. We know that Tashlhi doesn't, right? So at least for Amazigh, we can say, well, yeah, we have an example of Tashlhi that doesn't, and then others that don't. And then you go, oh, well, maybe. But then you look at Arabic dialect, same business happens. If you look, zoom out, you have dialect varieties that have bipartite and varieties that don't, just like Tashlhi. And so, yeah, I have no good answer. I'll just raise my hands and say, no, yeah. And, yeah.
symmetry, if I may call it symmetry, between Amazigh and Arabic, even the dialects where we have two negators. There is a behavior that is similar to Moroccan Arabic, which probably points to probably some sort of influence that we cannot, of course, find evidence of. It's let's take, for example, Tarifit or Tamazight, for example, where well, Shawrishi, Wishisha, etc. But we have Warishi. We have just cases. We have cases even in the two negating, or in dialects with two negators. We may have situations where there is only one negator that is possible. For example, if I just imagine I have not had breakfast, I have not had, because I was busy doing something, I can tell you, this not Urshik. But in this case, you have to do Urshik. Yeah. And we observe the same in Arabic. Makilit mashrabt, not makilit walula, you see? So that's the thing, something I wanted to, it was just a follow-up to something.
Looked at negation, there is this context, or Sheikh Urswich, which is Maklit Mashrit. You also in what are they called? Yeah. Allah matmshi, Allah urth hadith. Yeah, same thing. You don't have this. This interesting context that I don't know. You know, Kasman has a book on the influence of Arabic on Amazigh. I don't know if you guys have seen it. So he's. Yeah, I think he's got, that's the point of his whole book, so, which I recommend if you look at, he looks at the influence of, Arabic on Amazigh or the other way around, and he looks at the phonology, morphology, even syntax. It's something I didn't explore.
Thank you, Sir Hamid. Yeah, Sir Hussein Amazigh.
Thank you so much, Mr. Karim. Thank you so much, Mr. Ouali, for your presentation. It's very interesting. The topic is very interesting because we give us a lot of issues about the processes of grammaticalization, and this give us some answers of the question that still doesn't have answers for linguistic issues, especially with in-verbal language. So I have just some remarks or some questions related to your corpus. For example, the negation, and you give us an example, like I don't know this man, or sin sha argaza. I'd like to know in the translation that you gave when we can find Ursin Sha, we can find it in the translation. I don't know this man, donc Argaza, this man, but I don't know, so it's Ursnach, I don't know. But Sha, what is the role of Sha in this sentence? For me, Sha, it's equivalent of Kara in Tashlihit, something. And for me, this example, I can say Ursin Argazat without using Sha. So what is the role, syntactic role of the Sha in this example? So, yeah.
So you don't have Sha, the equivalent to Sha. You don't have the equivalent to Sha. But in Tamazight, we have Sha. So you use it as a negative concord element. So you say, Sha, right? Other Amazigh speakers can correct me. So we have both. And again, it is a negative concord element. What I'm arguing is that it is a grammaticalized morpheme, grammaticalized element from the word sha, meaning thin. Yeah. So it was used as a reinforcer of negation, and eventually it got grammaticalized to mean a negative concord item.
So thank you so much for your answer. Another element which I'm interested to to discuss with you is related to clitic doubling. And if you do like syntactic tests, so for example, the example that you gave, سنعتناس أبريد الوشن, سنعتناس نبريد الوشن. So you have these like a repetition of ilwashun, asin. If you do like syntactic tests, so it doesn't work. For example, as you told us in your presentation, if you test this example, we give it this focalization, for example. It doesn't accept or it doesn't allow focalization. So focalization, so ilwashn, sn'ata, asin. You have a kind of repetition. So for this sentence is not grammatical, if you know, it's agrammatical. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know why you give us this example, and you see is Amazigh language accept double clitics in this. Is this example, sn'atnaasn, abrid ilwashn. For me, there is a kind of repetition which maybe we cannot accept it as a correct. Yeah.
So this is that's why I shared that table with you. All right. So if one takes Swag's work seriously, he showed us that some at least from the corpus, there are languages that don't double. All right. But solution doubles 83%. Okay. So 80% of the examples he found, which is a large number of sentences, which I agree with, because Amazigh I do it all the time. They double that, right? So it's normal to say normal. That's the in fact that's the default. That's the unmarked one.
From another side, I mean, if you want to see if this sentence is 100% correct, because you saw it in a diachronic view, maybe if you have other tests, WH question, for example, ما مسنعت أبريد الوشن. We cannot say this sentence, you know. So that's why I say, even if you have these sentences, I mean, if it isn't maybe existed in other variety of Amazigh language, maybe if with syntactic issues, we cannot accept it as a sentence because you have a kind of repetition or replication of the same function, syntactic function, in the same sentence.
I don't quite understand what you mean by we can't accept it. I gave you a sentence that I judge with 100% confidence that it's a grammatical sentence. And I have other Amazigh speakers who could correct me that I'm saying, yes, it's normal for me to say, right? Now, I'm not forcing this on your dialect. In fact, I'm acknowledging that there is variation. And what I'm claiming is that, yes, we're not all on the same speed. Yeah, you don't have it yours, but mine does it differently, and we're not on the same speed. I'm saying that maybe demonstrates that the initial stages with these datives are gradually becoming agreement markers. There are contexts where you don't find them. Yes, questions you don't. But in C where you do, I showed you examples. See where you even find them with WH questions. The context where you don't find them in Amazigh, and this has to do with a talk I gave for those of you that are on Wednesdays. It's interesting that you don't get them with inanimates, and for good reason. So, for example, you say وشيخاس أماني يهنو, but you can't say وشيخاس أماني it's right. So, because semantically it means transfer of possession. And when you have transfer of possession, the possessor has to be animate. And that's one reason why it's prohibited when you have inanimates. But doubling exists all over the place.
Maybe it's in the side of normative, if you want to have a normative grammar of Amazigh language, maybe for the children. I mean, you have some rules of Amazigh language, and let's say, standard Amazigh language.
That you're getting into prescriptive stuff, which is beyond the scope of writing.
Okay.
Prescriptive is something that you impose,
Ah.
right? You impose to be the norm. That's not my business. I'm trying to understand how this language works, the mechanics of language that speakers produce, right? But something that's artificial, that's beyond what we're doing here. This is not.
Okay, thank you so much. So, for
Another question. So, okay, Hamid, go ahead. And ladies, please think of a question. Students, please think of a question.
Actually, I didn't have the intention to ask a question. I just want to invite you to reconsider the analysis of negation. The sh. It's known and everyone accepts that the idea that negation in Arabic is ma and sh. But if we consider some examples, it seems to me that sh, I'm just inviting you to reconsider, to think again about this. There are examples, and I'm building on what's the previous remarks. There are cases in which it seems to me that sh has more semantic content than a negation. For example, in Moroccan Arabic, you say ما عطيتوش الفلوس, and you need a definite noun phrase after sh. But if you delete sh, then definite NPs are not accepted. You cannot say ما عطيتو الفلوس. ما عطيتو احتريال. So it must be indefinite. So here, the sh expresses, it seems to me, I'm just inviting you, to think about it. It seems to me that sh has some kind of modality. You have, it builds on presupposition. Anyway.
So take the example that he gave me. Take the example that he gave me. I think we're in agreement. So when you say ما عطيتوش الفلوس, right? And you say, yeah, look, there you have sh. But when you say ما عطيتو احتريال, احتريال is a negative polarity item. And it's not a surprise that sh is prohibited in this context. That's exactly what I'm saying. When you have indefinites, like NPIs, you can't have sh. They're in competition. Because this negative concord item is introduced to reinforce. It's almost like a negative polarity item itself. But you can't say ما جاش حتى واحد, ما جا حتى واحد, ما شفت حتى واحد, ما كلا حتى حاجة. All these NPIs, in fact, this is exactly the context where sh is not there. So, and NPIs are indefinites. So I agree with you that the sh is in competition. When you have definites, then you can find it. Yeah, it's fine. But indefinites have both. It's an argument, but it's also, they behave like negative polarity items. Like, he didn't read, he didn't move a finger, type of in English. He didn't move a finger, he didn't gave me a red cent, and things like that. Oh, these are all negative polarity items. So I think I agree with you, but maybe I didn't make my thing clear. Yes.
Okay, other questions? Ladies, any questions?
Just a little follow-up to Ahmed's. I forgot the point. I had a very... Anyway, I think that syntactic analysis should not be just modular. That's against the modularity of syntax. The autonomy of syntax. There are syntactic phenomena that cannot be explained based on syntactic information alone, on the constituency test, for example. So we need to have probably, as Ahmed says, semantic information, sometimes pragmatic information, and okay.
I agree. I think that's exactly the point that I try to make. Yeah, the initial stages of syntax are all pragmatically driven. They're, yeah, otherwise, there's, syntax kicks in just when you start to see that a certain word has now assumed a grammatical function. And you don't get those programmatic readings anymore, right? When you say, scale up means just progressive. It does not convey a speaker's, say, disapproval or anything. But at some point, it was used just like the Lebanese example. It means progressive, but it also conveys a pragmatic speaker's attitude. Yeah, I completely agree. That's exactly my point. But so these are, so we don't speak language in a vacuum again. Yes, of course, context, pragmatics is very important. And there is grammar, it gets informed. But we still talk about the autonomy of syntax. We can still talk about, because there's some sentences that allow pure linguistic interpretation. No, yeah.
Just one little, and this is probably one of one reason to call for example, espousing a theoretical, maybe analytical tool like optimality theory, where a syntactic constraint can interact with a discoursal or with a pragmatic constraint, maybe to account, maybe provide a better account, perhaps. Yeah. All right.
Look, I won't be offended if you find a better account. Yeah, of course, by all means.
Thank you, Sinardine. Okay, we need some variety in questions. Please think of questions because we have to go for logistical reasons. Can I just give priority to ladies first, and then we can come back to your question? Go ahead. Thank you so much. You'll have to shout.
Yeah, I think it's not an outlandish claim. There are proposals out there about, say, change in English that are sound-driven, just like you said. You could get co-articulation that sort of drives how the speaker reanalyzes certain take, for example, what people call phonological cliticization. Like, so Zwicky makes a difference between two types of clitics, what he calls phonological clitics and what he calls syntactic clitics. Phonological clitics are things like, I've done it, right? It's an auxiliary that gets pronounced as a prosodic word with I, which is a pronoun. But that's different, say, from syntactic clitics. Syntactic clitics are cases where you have a pronoun understood as an argument surfacing in a non-canonical position. Take French. J'ai vu Jean, je l'ai vu. Semantically equivalent, one is a full DP and one is a pronoun. That's syntactic cliticization. And so I fail to see, in this case, if I start to see behavior of pronoun, where prosody comes in. Maybe it plays a role, but here you're looking at a pronoun that gets reanalyzed as an agreement morphe. Could it be that prosody or phonology plays aiding it along the way? Possible.
Just an example, right?
Yeah.
In other cases.
Right.
So
Possible,
I'm
yeah.
not claiming that
Yeah.
because of prosody.
Right.
I'm just saying maybe the rate of speech
Yeah.
brings things shorter, and later on, during the change, they become recognized as
Yeah.
syntactic pronouns. Or
Yeah. Possible, yeah. I have, yeah, it's a good point. I have, have nothing to say.
Okay, thank you, Nabila.
Okay, thank you, Professor Ouali. Thank you, Professor Karim. Actually, I have just a follow-up question concerning the example mentioned by Professor Amrus concerning the ambiguity. So you mentioned the example Gelsin Kilabo, and of course you said it is ambiguous because it is open to interpretation, of course. My question, if we take, for example, this utterance in a natural context between native speakers, of course, and we ask the question, for example, أشنو كيديروا? Of course, I think we'll never receive the answer Gelsin. We'll have the answer either Gelsin Kilabo or Kilabo, which means that for the native speaker in a natural context, so this ambiguity is not an option for them. I think this is just an impression.
So if you ask about what
Yes, Kidiro. Yes. So of course the answer will be definitely Gelsin Kilabo or Kilabo.
Yeah. So
But
possibility is Gelsin.
Gelsin Kilabo, which means, but we will never have, like, for example, from Gelsin.
Well, no. Yeah, of course. That's exactly what I expect. Yeah, because what's Gelsin Kediru is a question that you would ask when you have Gelsin as a aspectual marker, not as a predicate itself. That's exactly what you expect. So I'm in agreement. I agree. I'm sorry? Yeah, no, I agree, exactly. That, in fact, you just confirmed what I just said.
Can we take one last question from students, please, so that we can call it a day?
And if I may just, I'm sorry. As you said, if I may just make a comment about natural, because I can see the reasons behind it, the ideology, et cetera, right? So there's this thing about claim about us syntacticians making up sentences sitting in our armchairs. I try to be very careful and bring examples from from corpus, even though I have no problem with made-up sentences. Because the funny thing is, even though I made it up, nobody agreed with me when I asked you about this ambiguity, right? And some people say, well, you know, you have to give me a sense from context, usage-based, etc. Now, usage-based literature is, you know, like what you see is what you get. Sometimes you're not going to get what you want from usage from the corpus. But the funny thing is, children know a lot more than what you see in the Take negative data. Do you find negative data in corpus? If you answer that, in other words, anagrammatical sentences, do you find those in corpus? No, you don't, right? But you have no problem judging this as ungrammatical. And therefore, yeah, it's important to tap into a speaker's knowledge. You don't have to look at just the corpus and see if it's there in natural. Right? If I can use it, if I can tap another speaker and say if they can say a sentence or judge it, I have no problem with that. So I think that's more of an ideological difference. The usage-based camp and the non-usage-based camp. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Bensoukas. Thank you also, Professor Ouali. So I would invite you to bear with me because I'm not really sure if my question is legitimate enough. So you talked about anti-agreement, which is the phenomenon in which agreement is reduced or altered or maybe lost after post-extraction. That's the anti-agreement. So I'm working on agreement asymmetry in Standard Arabic, and I'm not sure if you know this phenomenon, but so we have two types of sentences in Standard Arabic: nominal sentence, verbal sentence. So in the verbal sentence, you have a reduced agreement, and can I make the assumption that it's because there is some kind of movement? So it's maybe let me use this, the underlying structure is the nominal sentence, right? Where you have, for example, like a sentence, الأساتذة حضروا الدرس, so حضروا is a full agreement, right? And can we say that it's the underlying structure, that it's a nominal sentence that changes into the verbal sentence when we try to utter a verbal sentence? In that case, الأساتذة حضروا الدرس would be حضر الأساتذة الدرس, and because of the extraction that happens to the verb, agreement is lost, and so we have the phenomenon of anti-agreement. Am I making sense?
You make sense. So you want to explain the partial agreement in Arabic by appealing to verb movement
So
rather
do
than...
you think this anti-agreement is an explanation for agreement distinction in Standard Arabic?
It's not the same. It's not the same. See, anti-agreement results when you extract the DP, not the verb, right? The partial agreement business that you find in Standard Arabic there's huge literature on this phenomenon, as you know, right? And has been a source of disagreement. There are people claim that the SVO order we get full agreement is not derivationally related to VSO. The SVO is separate. You have the SVO subject is topic. What traditional grammarian calls the mubtada. I'm sorry, the mubtada, right? It's directly merged there. And what you have, the grammatical subject is a null pronoun. Null pronominals require full agreement. And that's why you have al-asatida hadaru yadrusun. The VSO, well, I don't think there is one single proposal in the literature that gives a convincing story for why we get partial agreement. I'll tell you that outright. You take Abbas bin Mamun's work. You can take Awon Ital, Awon bin Mamun, and Lina Shweer's book. You can take Sama Sultan's, one of the best works, I think, in you can take, everyone has an incomplete story for why we have this partial agreement in. And this has, of course, raised debate since all the grammarians. The Kufa school disagreed with the other school, but the Kufa school says, remember the Akaluni al-Baraghitu example, that you get full agreement really with Akalatni al-Baraghitu. They say, oh no, those people are wrong. So, to make a long story short, it's not the same phenomenon. Yeah, because you have that case you have verb raising, not DP raising. Yeah.
I'm afraid we'll have to stop here. And I think we will have the opportunity to follow on the discussions during the post cafe, which is right across from here. So those of you who don't know, follow those who do. and you won't miss it. Concerning the presentation itself, it's been streaming on YouTube, and I put the link for those of you who can't reach it on the website, hopefully. And I would like to reiterate my thanks to all the people who made this possible, including you, of course, in the first place, but we also have like the support of our dean, the support of our administration, and the support of Si Mohsin, who's been here for the entire session. And we would like to thank also CNRS for making Si Hamid Ouali's stay possible. And I'm running out of things to say. I think that this has been a very wonderful session, and I would like to thank you all for this. And let's call it a day. Thank you so much, Si Hamid.
اوكي يا حيد الشيء هذا اوكي شكرا بزاف حتى التعليق اوكي اوكي شو وصلنا تلس he saved the day تقريبا
هما اجتماعات داكشي قال لي عندهم شي اجتماع بروغرام شحال هذا. Thank you so much. وما سويتيش. ما سويتش.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he's working on standard. Yeah. لا هو بغى هذاك partial agreement تاع يدرس طلابه بغى يعتبره واش هذاك a case of anti-agreement. جي ولكن anti-agreement is a result of subject extraction. In يدرس الطلاب it's not a case of a subject extraction. Subject is still in situ. Yeah, and it was still, I mean, you still have kind of T agreeing with the subject, still you don't get partial. شنو قالوا الناس بحال دابا أسامة سلطان يقول لك راه كاين تو تيز وحده اللي فيها 4 5 pages. شكرا بزاف على المجيء. والله شكرا بزاف على المجيء.
Very, very interesting.
Thank you.
Really.
Appreciate it.
I enjoyed it.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. شكرا. Today is much better? Oh, good. Alhamdulillah. I'm motivated? Oh, I'm sorry if I...